Good morning. Today we're going to talk about Jean Tirole. Okay, so who is Jean Tirole? He's currently the new Nobel laureate in economics and the general director of the Jean-Jacques Lafon Foundation in Toulouse Sciences Économiques at the University of Toulouse, France. His education was mainly done in several universities in France, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and others. Tirole has also been president of the 1998 Econometric Society and the European Economic Association in 2001. He also has honorary doctorates from various universities, like the University de Lausanne 2013, University of Mannheim 2011, HEC Montreal 2007, and the London Business School 2007. He is the author of more than 180 specific articles in economics and finance, and 8 books with titles such as Theory of Industrial Organizations, Theory of Games with Drew Vandenberg, Competition in Telecommunications with Jean-Jacques Lafon, and The Theory of Corporate Finance. He's got a doctorate honoris causa from the University of Brussels in 1989 and from the London Business School in 2007. He received the BBA Foundation Frontiers of Knowledge Award in Economics, Finance and Business Management in 2008, the Juro Jansson Award from the European Economic Association in 1993, and the Distinguished Service Award from the Public Utility Research Center in 1997. He got a foreign honorary member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences 1993 and the American Economic Association 1993. He also received a Sloan Scholarship 1985 and a Guggenheim Scholarship 1988. He won the 2014 Nobel Prize in Economics for his analysis of the power of business, competition, and regulation. Okay, so according to some of his analyses, many industrial sectors are dominated by a small number of large companies or by a monopoly. What is a monopoly? A monopoly happens when a single company or group becomes big enough to own all of the market for a particular type of product or service. Jean Tirole is one of the most influential economists of our time. He has made important theoretical research contributions in a number of areas, but most of all, he clarified how to understand and regulate industries with a few powerful firms. And an example could be Apple and Samsung, as they are the mainly technological companies that people buy. They don't need to compete with prices that much because people choose it like its preference between their technologies. So that's why Apple and Samsung are a monopoly in the phone and computer industry, mainly in the phones. Many industries are dominated by a small number of large firms or a single monopoly. Left unregulated, such markets often produce socially undesirable results. Prices higher than those motivated by cost, or unproductive firms that survive by blocking the entry of new and more productive ones. From the mid-1980s and onwards, Jean Tirole has breathed new life into research on such a market failures. His analysis of firms with markets power provides an unified theory with a strong bearing on central policy questions. How should the government deal with mergers or cartels, and how should it regulate monopolies? Before Jean Tirole, researchers and policymakers sought general principles of all industries. They advocated simple policy rules, such as capping prices for monopolies and prohibiting cooperation between competitors while permitting cooperation between different positions in the value chain. Jean Tirole showed theoretically that such rules may work well in certain conditions, but they did more harm than good in others. Price caps can provide key companies with strong motives to reduce costs, which is a good thing for society. But it also allows excessive profits, which is bad for society. Cooperation on price setting within a market is usually harmful, but cooperation regarding patent pools can benefit everyone. The merger of a firm and its supplier may encourage innovation but may also disturb competition. The best regulation or competition policy should therefore be carefully adapted to every industry's specific condition, because not every industry needs the same type of policy. In a series of articles and books, Jean Tirole has presented a general framework for designing such policies and applied it to a number of industries, ranging from telecommunications to banking. Drawing on these new insights, governments can better encourage powerful companies to become more productive and at the same time to prevent them from harming competitors and customers. Because if they want to sell, they need to have a fair play. Opening quotations, if one firm holds all the power, that is not necessarily a bad thing, close quotation, Tirole. For example, in some technology sectors, a single firm dominates because it puts forth an innovation that customers value. The same reasoning holds true for utilities. Market domination is fine when one company dominates because it has a significant investment, such as building a power grid. But when a utility dominates simply because of luck or of circumstance, that sues competition unfairly. People choose products because of their technology advance, but if it's just because of luck or propaganda, the competition doesn't become fair.
Bank bailouts. Several co-written papers in 1990s examining bank regulation foresaw many of the problems that roiled the financial sector during the 2008 crisis. The research evaluated different statements, system, and clearinghouse to head off the expectation that government will rescue failing banks in a systemic crisis. 2 years ago, he looked at how to jump-start a financial market in crisis, offering a model for regulators to buy weak access and lend against access of intermediate quality. Regulatory capture. With his longtime collaborator Jean Tirole, he developed a model to address the problem when regulators are captured by a regulated industry. In other words, when regulation ends up benefiting those who produce goods rather than those who consume them. Explaining the theory that got Jean Tirole his Nobel. You have to regulate each company differently, just as one child may be motivated by detention, another by a reward of a bag of sweets, and a third by price. So individual companies, even those in the same sector, will be motivated by different things. The challenge for regulators is to determine what the best incentive is for each company and use that knowledge to regulate them. It gets particularly tricky when there isn't much competition. The government may tell an electric company it can only make 10% more than it. Capital investment. Tabarrok explains but then that electric company may not have any incentive to keep costs down. Instead, Tirole proposed a more complex regulation that includes a price cap, letting the firm keep more profits below the cap. The difficulty Tirole's theory point out are in the interpretation of the message that regulators transmit to their target companies. Just as teachers have to be cognizant of how a statement to the class will land with each individual student. But very simple, this already boils down to communication within the financial sector. Tirole found that by offering a menu of more complex, precise options, Tabarrok says regulators can learn more about the real incentives at play in the industry. They are policing that not can be applied elsewhere. From defense contrast to CEO compensation, but it has limits, precisely because different rules are optimal in different circumstances. The regulator, even a sophisticated regulator, may not be able to pull off the trick which Tirole recommends that they try, Tabarrok says. Just like teachers who can find it tough to pull off the trick of keeping an entire class engaged, challenged, and disciplined all at the same time. He won the Nobel Prize for having incorporated new analytical methods into economic theory and for his rigorous reformulation of the theory of general equilibrium. According to the Swedish Central Bank, he won in 1988 for his pioneering contributions to the theory of markets and efficient utilization of resources. According to the Sveriges Riksbank, allows favorable market-based exchange within a group of countries that had generally equivalent economies and could form a free trade zone, but was protectionist with respect to trade between countries with very different economies.
In some industries, average costs are minimized when production is concentrated within a single firm. When there is a scope for rapid innovation, such a market will usually be dominated by the same firm only for a limited period of time, until a new firm makes a super innovation. While the dominant firm may earn temporary monopoly rents from a pricing above marginal cost, those rents might be an acceptable price for society to pay in order to encourage innovation. In other cases, there is a little scope for the competitive challenges by new and innovative entrants. For example, production may rely on a unique resource or an investment which is prohibitively expensive to duplicate, and the usage of which cannot be completely specified in a contract. Water mains, railroads, tracks, and electricity transmission lines are a few examples. Firms that control such a resource, whether public or private, are called natural monopolies. How can natural monopolies be prevented from exploiting their own dominant power at the expense of consumers and society at large without making them to go out of business? If a monopoly is allowed to price freely, prices will typically be too high and output too low. In the firm is instead forced to price at a marginal cost. It may not to break even and public funds must be used to cover its losses. The modern theory of regulation characterizes optimal regulations under realistic assumptions about information asymmetries, the distributional concerns of a government, and the social cost of public funds. Also, in many cases, questions arise about the time frame for regulation. For what period should the first set of regulations be designed, and how should it be reviewed and renewed? Langford and Tirole analyzed these questions into two significant articles from 1988 into 1990, which were based on work carried out by Frexias, Langford, and Tirole in 1985. Assume that the regulator and the producer cannot sign a long-term contract but only a series of short-term contracts. This means that the producer's current actions may affect his future regulation. If a low-cost producer works hard and thus achieves large profit during the first contract period, the regulatory authority may tighten the demands of the next contract in order to reduce the profit potential. The risk is that the producer predicts this ratchet effect and thus works less hard, disadvantaging the business. If the authority cannot draw up a long-term contract, it is impossible to get the producer to choose the appropriate effort at a reasonable cost, and thus indirectly reveal its cost conditions. Instead, the authority could choose to use weaker incentives and gradually learn these conditions. This will happen quickly if the business is a complex and unprofitable, and more slowly if it's a simpler and more profitable. In most countries, the framework for regulation is first decided at a higher level, the government, and a public authority is then tasked with designing the precise terms of the regulation. In 1986, Tirole had analyzed the optimal reward system in a similar hierarchical relationship, studying a more general case with one principal, the owner, one supervisor, foreman, and one agent, the worker. The primary problem is that the authority and the firm have more information about the business than the government. A poorly designed framework means that there is a risk of the two colluding to hide this information from the government. To the benefit of the business, the authority becomes the firm advocate. In 1991, Langford and Tirole examined how regulations should be designed to minimize the risk. The main result of their analysis is that the government should establish a framework that explicitly considers the risk of the regulator hiding information and colluding with the regulated firm. Even with a well-designed framework, a regulator will sometimes appear to be an advocate of the firm, but despite this, she will nevertheless not allow herself to be bribed or actively withhold information. Also, Jean Tirole has made seminal contributions to organizational economics. Tirole's principal supervision agent model is the work harness for modeling heritage in organization. Its three-tier structure describes the essence of many situations better than the standard principal agent model. Many organizations have at least one layer of supervisors who report information to principals on the behavior or circumstances of agents. For example, accountants primarily collect and communicate such information. A general theme of the literature generated by Tirole's article is that low power incentives may be an optimal response to the threat of supervisor-agent collision. This was the contribution to organizational economics. On the other hand, a first reason for regulation is that financial institutions are highly interconnected through complex, often short-term borrowing and lending arrangements. When a single large financial institution goes bankrupt, insolvency may therefore quickly spread to other financial institutions in a systemic financial crisis with immense negative consequences for the economy, such as the one followed in Lehman failure in 2008. A second reason is that many de facto lenders to financial institutions are ordinary consumers and households through deposits and pension savings. Since households may not have sufficient information to evaluate and monitor the health of the banks where they keep their deposits, consumers can suffer severe consequences when a financial institution fails. This lack of information can also trigger financial panics where many individuals run to withdraw their deposits from a bank that is rumored to be failing, effectively then causing the bank to fail. For these reasons, the government needs to be able to rescue bailout failing institutions to avoid systematic crises and bank runs and to protect consumers. But when failing financial institutions are bailed out, exposed, this may lead to a moral hazard as a bank managers have incentives to take on higher financial risk than otherwise. A regulator may therefore need to restrict leverage and risk-taking at financial institutions such as thorough minimum requirements on bank equity, capital, and liquidity. A common theme in Tirole's work is the design of financial regulation that optimally trades off efficiency, intervening to avoid systemic crises with ex-ante efficiency, imitating the moral hazard problem that produced the prospect of crisis to begin with.
Tirole has published about 200 professional articles in economics and finance, as well as 10 books covering the theory of industrial organization, and other books like Game Theory with Drew Forenberg, A Theory of Incentives in Procurement and Regulation with Jean-Jacques Lafont, who was his colleague in a lot of studies making by him, the prudential regulation of banks, competition in telecommunications, financial crisis, liquidity, and the international monetary system, and the theory of corporate finance. His research covers industrial organization, regulation, game theory, banking and finance, psychology and economics, international finance, and microeconomics. This research and books makes him, Tirole, was awarded the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Science in 2014 for his analysis of market power and the regulation of natural monopolies. So, the new theoretical tools that Tirole found was the research would come to build upon new scientific methods, particularly in game theory and contract theory. There were great hopes that this method will contribute to practical policy. Game theory, this book, would aid the systematic study of how firms react to different conditions and to each other's behavior. The next step will be to propose appropriate regulation based on the new theory of incentives contracts between parties with different information. However, even though many people could see the research questions, they were difficult to solve. So, with this investigation and this knowledge that Tirole found with his studies and his research at his university, we can see that give a lot of solutions to the people and the economist or the businessman, the chiefs of a lot of big enterprise around the world. He gives the solutions to a lot of problems that these people have on their minds, or every day they don't know how to react to this problem. So that's why Tirole, with these solutions and others knowledge, he received this award in 2014. In 1986, Tirole and his new deceased colleague Jean-Jacques Lafont made an important contribution to the theory of regulation. They demonstrated how a clever set of production contracts can circumvent the problem of asymmetric information in a market where the regulatory authority lacks complete knowledge of a monopoly caused in choices of production techniques. So this theory of regulation includes theories of the market power that Jean Tirole explained us in his research. Interest group of theories that describe stakeholders' interest in regulation, and theories of government opportunities that describe why restrictions on government discretion may be necessary for the sector to provide efficient services for customers. We need to know also that the capitalist government have a lot of problems. So with this theory to provide a regularity in the economy is perfect. So in general, the conclusions of this theory are that regulation occurs because the government is interested in overcoming information asymmetries with the operator and in aligning the operator's interest with the government interest. So we have the government and the operator, or the enterprise or group that want to have this service. We have these two actors. So a second part, customers desire protection from market power when competition is non-existent or ineffective. And in a third part, operators desire protection from rivals. And finally, operators desire protection from government opportunity. So normative theories of regulation generally conclude that regulators should encourage competition where feasible, minimize the cost of information asymmetries by obtaining information and providing operators with incentives to improve their performance, provide for price structures that improve economic efficiency, and establish regulatory processes that provide for regulation under the law on independence, transparency, predictability, legitimacy, and credibility for the regulatory system. So finally, we can conclude this podcast saying that Tirole, with that research, had a lot of deserve with this prize, because with that we say before. So he was helped with economists and policy makers to understand how best to regulate large firms, especially where regulators face asymmetric information, where they do not have access to the same knowledge and the firms they seek to regulate. As a recipient of the prize, Mr. Tirole will now receive 8 million of crowns, and he is the scientific director of industrial economics at Toulouse University, and earned his philosophy doctorate at MIT. This year's prize is about market power, said by Tor Ollingsson, Permanent Secretary of Royal Swedish Academy of Science. So that's why Jean Tirole wins this economic Nobel Prize.